The day I sold my neighbor's SUV to the junkyard started out like any other. Coffee, coding, and the mellow rhythm of my bass echoing off the walls of my makeshift studio. No one could have predicted that a simple garage would become the epicenter of a neighborhood war. I'm a software developer, have been working remotely for 3 years, and finally managed to buy my first house in a condo that seemed perfect. Quiet, tree-lined, with clear rules set by the homeowners association that guaranteed the upkeep of the place. I paid a little extra for the privilege of having a big garage, which I immediately turned into my creative hideaway, half programming office, half music studio. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. Music has always been my escape valve. I'm no virtuoso, but after spending 10 hours debugging code, nothing calms me more than creating a couple of beats and melodies. I set up the space with decent acoustic insulation, audio monitors, a MIDI keyboard, and some instruments. My little creative corner cost me a good chunk of my savings, but it was worth every penny of mental peace. For 6 months, I lived in harmony with my neighbors. I respected quiet hours, attended the association meetings, and kept my garden immaculate. That is, until Veronica arrived. She moved into the house next door with her husband Russell. Our first meeting seemed promising: smiles, formal introductions, and even an exchange of numbers for the neighborhood emergencies. The friendly facade lasted exactly 3 days. "I think we're not quite on the same page," said Veronica at my door, smiling tensely. "This condo has a certain standard we've maintained for years. I noticed you have frequent visitors who park on the street. We have designated spots precisely to avoid this kind of visual disorder." I politely explained that my musician friends came over occasionally for small recording sessions, always during allowed hours, and that the visitor spots were 2 blocks away, too far for sensitive equipment. "I understand, but rules are rules," she replied, perfectly adjusting her hair. "By the way, I heard some sounds coming from your garage last night. A little late for noisy activities, don't you think?" Within 2 weeks, Veronica had even put her name forward and been accepted on the association board. 2 weeks later, I started receiving official notifications about supposed violations from the volume of my studio, which I kept within acceptable limits, to the shade of blue on my mailbox, apparently too vibrant for the condo's standards. The real confrontation began on a spring afternoon when a hailstorm hit our area. On my way back from the market, I found Veronica's Lexus SUV parked under my small carport. My own vehicle was exposed, suffering minor damage to its bodywork. It was an emergency, she later explained, with no remorse in her voice. "My car is new, and that hail could have caused significant damage. I'm sure you understand." The following week, during an association meeting, a new rule was proposed and passed: emergency sharing of parking spaces during severe weather events. Of course, Veronica had worked that out without my knowledge. The real invasion happened a month later. Coming back from a morning walk, I found my garage open and Veronica's SUV parked among my equipment. My MIDI keyboard was out of place, clearly moved to make room for the car. "How did you get in here?" I asked when I confronted her. "I used the code," she replied casually. "The previous owner gave it to us for emergencies. And it was raining again. This is my private studio. You moved my equipment without permission. Don't let it happen again," I warned firmly. She simply smiled, that cold smile I had learned to recognize. You should be happy to have neighbors who look out for each other. Right? Even after my clear warning, I found her car in my garage again the following week. This time, one of my audio monitors was on the floor with its screen scratched. That was the last straw. After documenting everything with photos, I called a discreet tow truck and gave explicit instructions. I wanted to teach a lesson about respecting private property, once and for all. The doorbell rang at 5:43 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Veronica with her face twisted in anger, holding her cell phone like a weapon. "Where's my car?" she yelled as soon as I opened the door, forcing her way into my house. "The tracker shows it was here and now it's gone." I kept the calm that years of debugging someone else's code had taught me. Ah, you mean the SUV that parked on my private property without permission, even after I explicitly asked you not to do it? I don't have time for your games. Tell me where my Lexus is now, or I'm calling the police. Her voice echoed off the walls, probably audible for the whole block. About that. I paused deliberately. I considered it an unwanted donation. You repeatedly left it on my property even after warnings, so I figured you didn't want it anymore. It was sold to a junkyard this morning. The silence that followed was absolute. Veronica stared at me, blinking several times as if her brain was rebooting. You sold my car for scrap? Each word came out like she was testing a foreign language. Exactly. But don't worry, the company gave me a full receipt. I can pass you their contact if you want to negotiate buying it back, though by now they've probably started dismantling it. The scream that escaped her could have shattered tempered glass windows. Within seconds, she was on the phone, yelling to the police about an outright theft and a psychopathic neighbor. Amid her hysterical shouts, I caught the operator asking for calm and details. When she hung up, her threat came laced with venom. You have no idea what mistake you made. My husband is a personal friend of the chief. Your career, your house, your precious music, is all over. Interesting you mention that, I replied calmly, pointing toward a small camera in the corner of the ceiling. Because I've been recording every unauthorized entry onto my property. Including when you damaged my audio equipment, which is valued at over $5,000. She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the house tremble. Less than an hour later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Russell, Veronica's husband, with clenched fists and a red face. Where did you hide my wife's car, you idiot? He demanded, using his height to try and intimidate me. Good evening to you too, Russell. Your wife repeatedly invaded my property after explicit warnings. I considered the car abandoned and acted accordingly. Listen here, he lowered his voice in a threatening whisper, you have exactly 24 hours to return our car intact or I'm going to make your life a living hell. Understand? Before I could reply, Russell's phone rang. I saw his face change as he listened. He took a few steps away, speaking frantically on the phone and occasionally throwing furious looks in my direction. You're lying, he murmured on the phone. That isn't. More silence. I understand. Yes. After hanging up, his demeanor completely changed. That car really was parked in your garage without permission, he asked in a calmer tone. Yes, several times. I have security cameras, Russell. And witnesses. Your wife used an old code to access my property without authorization. He took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair in frustration. Look, I can offer you compensation for the trouble. How much do you want for telling me where the car is and putting an end to this? It's not about money. It's about basic respect for other people's property. Can I see the recordings? I invited him inside, a calculated decision. On my laptop, I showed him multiple entries of Veronica into my garage, including the moment when she clearly pushed my equipment to make room, causing the audio monitor to fall. Jesus Christ, Russell murmured, sinking into the sofa. She told me you'd given permission and then changed your mind. I never gave permission. In fact, I explicitly asked her not to do that after the first time. He sat in silence for almost a minute, processing. My lawyer called, he finally said. He said that if you really sold the car for scrap, we're in a legally complicated situation. We have insurance, but it doesn't cover, well, voluntary abandonment. I understand your concern. We have kids in college, he continued, suddenly looking 10 years older. We can't afford a loss like this right now. Please, just tell me where the car is. I'll make Veronica apologize formally. I studied his worn-out face, so different from his earlier arrogance. The strategy was working exactly as planned. Russell, I'll be honest with you. The car wasn't sold for scrap. His eyes lifted, mixing confusion with hope. I had a tow truck take it to a secure parking lot downtown. It's perfectly intact. I handed him a card with the address. Pay the towing and parking fees, and you can pick it up tomorrow. Why did you say you sold it? To give you a taste of what it feels like to have something important taken without permission. Especially after repeated warnings were ignored. He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson. Thank you. And I'm sorry for her behavior. And mine too. After he left, I knew the storm was just beginning. 2 hours later, I received a notification from the association's board calling an emergency meeting for the next day. The subject, hostile behavior and criminal actions among residents. That night, my phone wouldn't stop. First came furious messages from Veronica, threatening lawsuits for emotional trauma and defamation. Then, calls from unknown numbers, probably her allies in the condo. Finally, an email from Gregory, the association president, asking for your side of the events before the meeting. I spent the night meticulously organizing all the evidence. I printed out the unfounded notifications I'd received over the last few months. I edited the security camera footage, clearly marking dates and times. I dug up old emails where I formally requested the association register my studio as a protected workspace. I contacted my friend Daniel, a lawyer specialized in real estate disputes, who generously sent me an opinion on property invasion and abuse of power in residential associations. When the sun rose, I was exhausted but prepared. The community room was packed by 6 p.m. Familiar faces and others I rarely saw at regular meetings. Gregory, a retired man with graying hair who usually ran the meetings impartially, looked uncomfortable. Veronica was sitting in the front row, impeccably dressed, with a folder of documents on her lap and an air of anticipated triumph. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting, Gregory began. We have a serious situation to resolve involving 2 of our residents. To ensure everyone understands the complete context, we will first hear from Mrs. Veronica Turner, then Mr. Scott Mendez, and finally, we will open the floor to questions and deliberations from the board. Veronica walked to the front like a prosecutor ready for the final accusation. For 20 minutes, she built an elaborate narrative portraying me as a frustrated musician disturbing the condo's peace, refusing to follow parking rules, and finally stealing and selling your vehicle out of spite when she gently tried to mediate the situation. This man is a danger to our community, she concluded dramatically. He admitted to selling my car for scrap, causing severe financial and emotional damages. I demand his immediate expulsion from the condo and full compensation for the damages. When my turn came, I walked slowly to the front, carrying only a USB drive and a slim folder. The contrast with Veronica's exaggerated presentation was deliberate. Good evening, everyone. Unlike Mrs. Turner, I won't give an emotional speech. I'm just going to show you the facts. I plugged the USB drive into the room's projector and began my presentation. First, I showed the official registration of my studio with the association, approved 6 months earlier. Then, I displayed the decibel test results from an independent company, proving that the acoustic insulation kept the noise well within permitted limits. Now, about the car incident. The security footage spoke for itself. Veronica entering the code, coming in without authorization, moving expensive equipment, and on one clear occasion, causing an audio monitor to fall. The room stayed in complete silence as the recordings played. As you can see, after multiple unauthorized entries and damage to my property, I decided to remove the invading vehicle, as the law allows. The car is safe in a downtown parking lot and can be retrieved at any time upon payment of the applicable fees. A few murmurs ran through the room. I never sold the car for scrap. It was a lesson about what it means to have your property taken without permission, after repeated warnings were ignored. I opened the folder and handed out copies of the legal opinion to the board members. This document, prepared by a specialized lawyer, clarifies that my action was legally defensible given the history of invasions. It also details how Mrs. Turner abused her position on the board to approve rules that exclusively benefited her, such as the emergency parking sharing clause. The silence in the room was almost palpable when I finished. I'm not asking for anyone to be expelled. I just ask that the rules be applied fairly and that my property is respected, just as I respect the property of all the residents in this condo." The uncomfortable silence following my presentation was broken by Gregory, clearing his throat and adjusting his glasses. "Well, that certainly clears up a lot of points. Before we deliberate, would anyone from the community like to speak on this matter?" To my surprise, hands began to raise all around the room. The first to speak was Mrs. Hernandez, a retired teacher who lived at the end of the street. "I've been living in this condo for almost 2 decades," she began in a soft but firm voice. "I've never seen our rules manipulated like this. Mrs. Turner came to my house last month to complain about my window boxes, saying they were excessively colorful and would lower neighboring property values. When I explained that my garden had won the Best Landscaping Award from the association for 3 consecutive years, she threatened to propose a new rule limiting the types of flowers allowed. Other neighbors shared similar experiences. The young couple from Block B recounted how Veronica regularly took photos of their kids playing in the garden, claiming she was documenting infractions. The Thompsons, who had installed solar panels on their roof, told how she tried to stop them even after the board officially approved it, claiming that they reflected too much light onto her property. The most moving testimony came from Mr. Geller, an 80-year-old man who rarely attended meetings. "My wife passed away 6 months ago," he said in a trembling voice. "My musician grandson comes to play the piano for me on Sundays. It's the only time of the week I truly look forward to." Last month, Mrs. Turner sent a formal notice saying the piano was noisy and disruptive, even though we only play for an hour, always in the afternoon. When I explained the situation, she suggested I consider moving to a retirement home where I could listen to music without disturbing high-value properties. Tears shone in the eyes of several people. I saw Veronica squirming uncomfortably in her chair, her glare shifting between anger and despair as she realized the tide had turned. "I have one more point to add," I said, rising again. "I brought copies of all the violation notifications I received over the past 3 months. Interestingly, all of them were issued after I refused Mrs. Turner's invitation to permanently give up my parking spot for her second car. I would like the board to analyze whether there is a pattern of retaliation and abuse of power." Gregory stroked his graying beard, visibly disturbed. "I think we have enough information to deliberate. The board will retreat for a few minutes." For the next 30 minutes, the community room turned into a murmur of conversations. I noticed small groups forming, neighbors sharing stories, exchanging phone numbers, some even laughing together. It was as if a heavy curtain had been lifted from the condo. A lady I rarely saw approached me. "I'm Claire from Block D. I've played the cello for 40 years and stopped practicing at home because I was afraid of Mrs. Turner's complaints. Maybe we could talk about forming a small musical group for the community? It would be lovely to have music at our events." Veronica remained isolated in a corner, furiously typing on her cell phone, occasionally shooting venomous glares my way. Russell did not show up at the meeting. When the board returned, the mood in the room changed. Gregory looked like he had aged 10 years, but his posture was firmer. "After reviewing all the evidence presented, the board has reached a unanimous decision," he announced. "First, all the violation notifications issued against Mr. Mendez in the last 3 months are officially nullified due to lack of proper justification. Second, the emergency parking sharing clause is revoked, effective immediately." I breathed a sigh of relief, but Gregory wasn't finished. "More importantly, the board has determined that Mrs. Turner abused her position for personal gain and to intimidate other residents, violating our charter principles. Therefore, she is removed from her position on the board, effective immediately. Additionally, she must issue a formal apology to Mr. Mendez and reimburse any damages caused to his equipment." Surprised looks ran through the room. It was rare for the board to take such severe measures. Finally, Gregory continued, "This situation has shown us the need to review our policies. We are forming a special committee to rewrite the association rules, prioritizing the community and mutual respect, not just real estate values. We ask for volunteers to represent the different perspectives and needs of the residents." The meeting ended with a sense of renewal we hadn't felt in a long time. As people dispersed, many came up to greet me or just chat. I discovered there were musicians, artists, and even another software developer living in the condo, people who, like me, had withdrawn into anonymity because of the oppressive environment that had taken hold. Veronica left without saying a word to anyone, her posture rigid and her face unreadable. The next morning, Russell appeared alone to retrieve the car, silently paying the due fees and leaving an envelope containing a check to cover the damages to my equipment. The following weeks brought surprising changes. The special committee worked hard to reform the association rules, creating a more balanced set of guidelines. One of the new policies, which I particularly supported, stated that cultural and artistic activities would be encouraged during reasonable hours, recognizing their value to the community. We organized a small music festival in the central garden of the condo, where I had the opportunity to present some original compositions. Mrs. Hernandez brought her famous empanadas, Mr. Geller and his grandson performed an emotional duet, and even the kids from Block B took part in an impromptu percussion performance using buckets and pans. It was during this event that I noticed the moving truck parked in front of Veronica and Russell's house. I didn't feel satisfaction or triumph, just a slight relief. Gregory told me they had decided to move to a more exclusive condo on the other side of town. She said she could no longer relate to the new profile of residents, Gregory explained, with a slight smile at the corners of his mouth. Apparently, our music festival was the last straw. In the following months, I finished my first EP in the garage studio, collaborating with Claire on the cello and other musician neighbors I met during the festival. I kept the security cameras installed, some lessons are too important to forget, and filed all the documentation of the incident in an organized folder, just to be safe. The condo flourished under the new policies. The community gardens expanded, the association meetings turned into genuine dialogue spaces, and we even implemented a skill-sharing system where residents could trade services and knowledge, from music lessons to plumbing repairs. One autumn afternoon, while I was working on a new melody, I received an unexpected email from a local newspaper wanting an interview about collaborative communities and creative conflict resolution. Apparently, our little condo had become a regional example of positive transformation. Sitting in my garage studio, watching the kids playing freely in the shared garden through the window and listening in the distance to Claire practicing for our next performance on the cello, I reflected on how such an unpleasant conflict had, ironically, made space for something far more valuable. The true value of a community is not in strict rules or pristine appearances, it's in genuine connections, mutual respect, and the freedom to be authentically human, with all our imperfections and talents. I still keep that parking receipt where I stored Veronica's SUV, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected places. And although I never really sold a car to the junkyard, I learned that setting clear boundaries is just as important as building bridges. The music flowing out of my studio now is different, richer, more collaborative, more confident. Just like me, it found its true place in this condo that ceased to be just a group of houses, becoming a genuine home built not on imposed rules, but on respect earned. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. And what about Veronica? I heard she quickly joined the homeowners association at the new condo. I truly hope she learned something from our experience. After all, even the best compositions start with dissonant notes before they find their harmony.